Chief Michael Carter stepped off the helicopter onto the cracked concrete of a remote airstrip, the hum of the rotors fading as he collected his bags. The air was thick with the heat of a setting sun, casting an amber glow across the quiet, isolated landscape. As the rotors wound down to silence, Carter took a deep breath, momentarily enjoying the stillness that seemed far removed from the demands of his position. He was known as a respected, unwavering leader in the police department, a man of integrity who commanded loyalty and respect. After a brief, well-deserved vacation, he felt ready to return to his duties and continue making positive changes in his department. As Carter began walking toward a parked SUV, the faint sound of voices drifted toward him. He looked up to see two police officers approaching from the direction of a dusty patrol car. Both men walked with a swagger, their faces hard and unsmiling. Carter raised a hand in greeting, assuming they were here to welcome him back or perhaps offer a ride into town. However, their expressions conveyed something different, something unsettling. "Evening, officers," Carter greeted, his tone professional and warm, despite their cold demeanor. The first officer, a young man with sharp features and an unyielding gaze, narrowed his eyes at Carter, sizing him up. "Mind telling us what you're doing here?" he demanded, his voice edged with suspicion. Carter hesitated, momentarily taken aback by the hostility in the officer's tone. "Just returning from a trip," he replied calmly, extending a hand. "Chief Michael Carter. I believe we haven't met." The two officers exchanged a look, then laughed, a mocking, dismissive sound that sent a chill down Carter's spine. The second officer, broader and older with a hardened expression, folded his arms. "Yeah, right. And I'm the governor," he sneered, glancing at his partner, who smirked in agreement. Carter held his composure, his hand still extended, though he felt a twinge of frustration. He was no stranger to skepticism, but there was something unsettling about their demeanor, a sense of defiance. Lowering his hand, he kept his voice steady. "Gentlemen, I don't believe this is necessary. I am the police chief, and I have every right to be here." But the officers only stepped closer, invading his personal space. "Sure you are," the first officer mocked, glancing over Carter's casual attire as if searching for a flaw, a reason to doubt his authority. "Funny, you don't look like any chief I've ever seen. What's the real reason you're here?" A surge of anger flickered in Carter's chest, but he suppressed it, maintaining his professionalism. "Look," he said, his voice now firmer, "I don't have time for games. I've had a long day, and I'd appreciate it if you'd let me through." Instead of backing down, the officers exchanged another mocking glance, and the first officer took a step closer, now glaring down at Carter with open contempt. "Let you through?" he scoffed, his tone dripping with disdain. "You think you can just walk in here, claiming to be someone important, and we're supposed to just roll out the red carpet for you?" Realizing the situation was escalating, Carter took a step back, hoping to de-escalate with reason. "Officers, I'm giving you a direct order," he said, his voice steely. "I am your superior, and I expect you to treat me with the respect my position warrants." But his words seemed only to fuel their defiance. The second officer laughed, crossing his arms defiantly. "We don't answer to you. Maybe you need a little reminder of who's in charge around here." Before Carter could respond, the first officer's hand shot out, shoving him backward. The force of the push caught him off guard, and he stumbled, struggling to keep his balance. Shock rippled through him. Never in his years of service had he been treated with such open hostility, especially not by members of his own department. Regaining his footing, Carter's expression hardened. "This is your last warning," he said, his voice low and filled with authority. "Stand down now, or there will be consequences." But his words fell on deaf ears. The officers' expressions darkened, and without warning, they closed in on him, their fists clenched, their eyes filled with contempt. Carter barely had time to raise his arms in defense before the first blow landed, striking him across the jaw. Pain exploded through his face, but he held his ground, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing him fall. Yet the assault continued. The officers showed no mercy, their fists raining down upon him, each blow fueled by a simmering hatred that defied reason. Carter staggered, his vision blurring as he struggled to shield himself from the relentless attack. His body screamed in agony, but he forced himself to remain standing, refusing to be broken by their cruelty. In the midst of the beating, one officer leaned close, his voice a sneering whisper. "You think you're somebody? You're nothing. Just another washed-up cop with delusions of grandeur." Through the haze of pain, Carter met the man's gaze, his own eyes filled with a fierce, unyielding determination. "You can beat me down all you want," he rasped, his voice filled with resolve. "But you'll never take away my integrity." The words seemed to infuriate the officer, who responded with a brutal kick to Carter's ribs, sending him crashing to the ground. Pain shot through him as he struggled to breathe, but even in his battered state, he clung to his dignity, refusing to let them break his spirit. Finally, when Carter was too weakened to stand, the officers took a step back, laughing at the sight of him lying bruised and bleeding on the cold concrete. The first officer sneered, pulling a lighter from his pocket. "You think you're so important? Let's see how important your ride is now." Before Carter's horrified eyes, they turned toward his helicopter, dousing it with fuel before setting it ablaze. Flames roared to life, engulfing the aircraft in a fiery inferno, casting an eerie glow across the darkening sky. As the officers walked away, leaving him abandoned and broken at the airstrip, Carter forced himself to sit up, the searing pain in his ribs and face a brutal reminder of his helplessness. But even as he watched the flames consume his helicopter, he felt a spark of determination ignite within him. He wasn't finished, not by a long shot. The night air was thick and cool as Chief Michael Carter staggered to his feet, each breath a searing reminder of the violence he'd just endured. The throbbing pain in his ribs, the ache in his face, and the burning remnants of his helicopter behind him painted a vivid picture of just how far some were willing to go to strip him of his authority. But despite the agony coursing through his body, he forced himself to move forward. The officers had left him here, abandoned, perhaps assuming he'd stay down, defeated. They were wrong. Each step toward town felt like an eternity, his body begging him to stop, to rest, but his mind was sharp, focused on one thing, justice. The stars glinted above him as he limped along the deserted road, illuminating his path in faint silver. He could almost hear the mocking voices of the officers in his mind, their taunts echoing with each painful step he took. Their disdain had cut deeper than any punch, challenging his very identity as a leader, as a man. But Carter had spent years in the force, facing resistance, criticism, even outright hostility. This was different, it was personal, and it was his responsibility to make sure that such behavior had consequences. As he neared the outskirts of town, the lights from the police station came into view, a distant beacon calling him forward. The station was familiar territory, the place where he'd spent countless hours working with his team, pushing for reforms, earning their respect, and standing by them as a mentor and leader. Tonight, he would return not as the unwavering figure they were used to, but as a bruised man demanding answers. The station loomed closer, and Carter's pace quickened. His mind raced through the confrontation, every blow, every word, and the helplessness he'd felt. But that helplessness was fading now, replaced by a burning resolve. He wasn't just going to walk back into his office quietly, he was going to take control, and he'd make sure the officers responsible would be held accountable. As he reached the station doors, he paused for a moment, steadying himself. He could feel the bruises throbbing, a grim reminder of the night's events. Bracing himself, he stepped inside, the harsh fluorescent lights casting a cold glow over his battered form. The officers on duty looked up, their expressions shifting from surprise to shock as they took in his appearance. "Chief! What happened?" Officer Martinez rushed forward, her face pale with concern as she took in the bruises and dried blood on his face. She, along with the others who had gathered, looked horrified, whispering among themselves, clearly shaken by the sight of their chief in such a state. Carter raised a hand to quiet them, his voice steady despite the pain. "I'm fine," he said, his tone commanding, silencing their questions. "But I need your focus. Right now, we have a situation that needs to be addressed immediately." The team fell silent, their attention locked onto him, a mix of concern and respect in their eyes. Carter's gaze swept over them, taking in the familiar faces of those he trusted, those he had worked alongside, and those he knew would support him through this challenge. "There are 2 rogue officers who attacked me tonight at the airstrip," Carter began, his voice strong despite his injuries. "They didn't recognize me, and even when I identified myself, they refused to listen. They beat me, destroyed my helicopter, and left me out there for dead." A murmur ran through the room, a mix of anger and disbelief. Carter held up a hand, his expression serious. "I don't need sympathy. I need results. We're going to find these officers, bring them in, and make sure they understand that no one is above the law, not even those who wear this badge." Officer Martinez and several others exchanged looks, their expressions hardening with determination. "We're with you, Chief," she said firmly, her voice filled with conviction. "Just tell us what you need." Carter nodded, feeling a sense of pride in his team's response. "Good. I want search teams mobilized immediately. They may try to hide, but we know this area better than they do. Start by checking any nearby motels, gas stations, or places they might be lying low. I want everyone on this, leave no stone unturned." The team sprang into action, organizing themselves with efficiency and purpose. Despite his injuries, Carter stayed in the station, directing their efforts, providing information, and offering guidance. Each movement, every command, only strengthened his resolve. The pain was still there, but it fueled him, reminding him of the fight he was in. The hours ticked by, tension hanging heavy in the air as officers reported back with updates. The leads were few at first, but persistence paid off. A tip came in that a pair of officers had been seen at a diner on the edge of town, looking nervous and out of place. Carter ordered a team to investigate immediately, his heart pounding as he watched them head out. As dawn began to break, casting a faint light over the town, the radio crackled to life. "Chief, we've found them," came the voice of Officer Martinez, her tone filled with a sense of victory. "They're holed up in a cabin in the woods. We're moving in now." Carter's breath caught, and he quickly responded, "Be careful. They're dangerous and likely armed. Secure the perimeter and make sure no one gets hurt. I'll be there as soon as I can." Ignoring the pain, Carter made his way to the scene, the determination in his step returning despite the night's events. As he arrived at the cabin, he saw his team surrounding it, their guns drawn, focused and ready. The officers had no place to run. With a sharp nod, Carter approached the cabin, his eyes hard as he looked at the place where his assailants were cornered. After a tense silence, the 2 rogue officers were finally led out in handcuffs, their expressions shifting from defiance to desperation. They avoided Carter's gaze, their earlier bravado replaced by the dawning realization of their fate. The first officer, the one who had mocked him so openly, now looked at the ground, unable to meet his eyes. Carter stepped forward, his voice low but filled with a quiet authority. "You thought you were above the rules," he said, his tone steady. "But tonight, you've learned the hard way that no one is." The officers said nothing, their silence a stark contrast to the arrogance they'd shown at the airstrip. Carter felt a sense of closure, a satisfaction in knowing that justice would be served. Turning to his team, he saw the respect and support in their eyes, a silent acknowledgement of the values he had always fought to uphold. In that moment, he knew that the night's events, though painful and humiliating, had only solidified his commitment to the mission he'd dedicated his life to. He would continue to lead with integrity, pushing for change from within, setting an example that others could follow. The pain lingered, a reminder of the cost of standing up for what was right. But as Carter looked at the faces of his team, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, a determination that burned brighter than ever. The cabin door creaked shut as the two rogue officers were led away in handcuffs, subdued and silent. The morning sun had risen fully, casting golden light through the trees, a quiet contrast to the tension that had defined the night. Chief Michael Carter stood among his team, bruised and battered but unwavering, as he watched the officers being placed in the back of a squad car. For a moment, he allowed himself to close his eyes, letting the early morning breeze cool his bruised face and ease the aches that still pulsed through his body. The team, still processing what had happened, gathered around him, their faces a mix of respect, concern, and lingering anger. Carter looked at each of them, his gaze steady, acknowledging their loyalty and the sacrifices they made for the uniform every day. This team, this family, had pulled together to see justice served. In their presence, Carter felt the weight of his own responsibility to uphold the values he'd always believed in. "Chief," Officer Martinez said, stepping forward. Her voice was quiet, filled with concern. "Are you going to be all right?" Carter nodded slowly. "I'll be fine," he assured her. "Thank you. All of you." He scanned the faces of his team, seeing their resolve, their loyalty, and, more than anything, their shared belief in justice. The experience of the night before had left them shaken, but also more unified. "I want to talk to all of you," Carter began, his voice carrying through the quiet of the morning. "This isn't just about what happened to me. What we went through tonight isn't just my story, it's ours. And it's a reminder of what we stand for, even when we face challenges from within." He paused, letting his words sink in, feeling the intensity of his team's attention. They had witnessed him beaten, humiliated, and betrayed by two of their own, but he knew they understood the larger picture. "Last night, we faced a test of integrity," Carter continued, his tone steady but filled with passion. "The men we arrested? They wore the same uniform we do, they walked the same halls, but they betrayed everything this badge stands for. They abused their power, ignored justice, and assumed that they were untouchable. But I want you all to remember this: no one is above the law. Not you, not me, not anyone." The team nodded, their expressions a blend of anger and pride. Carter saw a fierce resolve in their eyes, a determination to uphold the principles he'd instilled in them over the years. "We may wear these uniforms, but they don't give us a free pass," Carter continued, his voice growing stronger. "They're a responsibility, a promise to serve and protect, to stand against injustice, not contribute to it. The trust that people place in us? It's fragile. And it's our job to uphold it every single day." His words hung in the air, a weighty reminder of the standards they had all sworn to uphold. He could see the impact his message was having on them, reinforcing the values that bound them together. His own pain, the bruises and cuts from the previous night, seemed to fade in the light of his team's renewed commitment. Officer Martinez took a step closer, her eyes filled with respect. "Chief, I can't imagine what it must have felt like to go through that. But you showed us exactly what it means to be a leader. We're behind you, all of us." Carter nodded, his heart swelling with pride. This team had proven their loyalty, not just to him, but to the principles that defined their work. The strength he saw in their faces, the determination, reminded him why he had committed his life to this role. They were here because they believed in something bigger than themselves, a purpose, a duty to serve with honor. "Thank you, Martinez," he replied. "Each one of you showed courage tonight. You stayed true to the badge, and that's something no one can ever take away from us." He took a deep breath, glancing toward the police station in the distance. "Our job isn't always easy. Some days, it feels like the weight of the world is on our shoulders. But when we stand together, when we remember the oath we took, we're stronger than any challenge we face." As the team listened, Carter knew they were absorbing every word, their faces filled with the resolve that he had come to admire so deeply. The events of the night before had been brutal, testing them all in ways they hadn't anticipated. But now, in the dawn's early light, he could see that they had emerged from the experience with a stronger commitment to the values they cherished. "Today, we set a new standard," he said, his voice firm. "We rebuild trust, starting with each other. We hold each other accountable, and we remember that our job is to serve the people, not ourselves. The actions of two men won't define us. We're better than that." The team nodded, their expressions solemn but filled with a sense of purpose. Carter felt a wave of relief and pride, knowing that his message had resonated with them. As the sun continued to rise, casting a warm glow over the station, Carter turned to head inside, his mind already focused on the work ahead. He knew the road to change was long, and that there would be challenges along the way, but he also knew that he was not alone. This team, this family, was with him, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The journey to justice, Carter realized, wasn't about any one person. It was about a shared commitment, a collective belief in something greater than themselves. And as they stepped back into the station, side by side, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to continue leading with integrity and strength. Chief Michael Carter sat alone in his office, the blinds drawn to filter in the morning light that streamed through the window. The station was quiet now, his team having dispersed to carry on with their duties. The adrenaline of the night had worn off, and he could feel the deep, lingering ache of his injuries. Every bruise, every cut was a reminder of the price of leadership, of the sacrifices required to uphold justice. But as he looked around the room, at the awards on the walls, the framed badge on his desk, he knew that the pain was temporary. His purpose, however, was unwavering. The image of the rogue officers flashed through his mind, their sneering faces, the contempt in their voices, the complete disregard for the badge they wore. It wasn't the first time he had encountered resistance, and he knew it wouldn't be the last. But this experience had been different. It had struck at the very heart of his beliefs, challenging not just his authority, but his principles and his commitment to a better system. As he thought back to the confrontation, he could still feel the weight of their words, the mockery they'd wielded against him like a weapon. Yet, rather than weaken his resolve, it had strengthened his determination to lead by example, to ensure that his department would be a place where no one was above the law, and where respect for the badge was paramount. A knock on the door broke his thoughts. Officer Martinez stepped in, her expression serious but warm, a stack of papers in her hands. "Chief," she said quietly, "I just wanted to check in. We're all still reeling from last night." Carter managed a small, appreciative smile. "Thank you, Martinez. I think we all are." She nodded, her gaze earnest. "I think I speak for the whole team when I say that what you did last night, it showed us all what kind of leader you are. We respect you, Chief. And we're here for you." The sincerity in her words filled him with a deep sense of gratitude. It was moments like this, moments of solidarity, that reminded him of the impact he could make. "Thank you, Martinez. That means a lot," he said softly, feeling a renewed sense of responsibility toward each member of his team. As she left, Carter leaned back, letting her words sink in. This incident, painful as it was, had opened his eyes to the reality of the challenges they still faced within the department. It wasn't enough to enforce rules, he needed to be proactive in ensuring that every officer understood and respected the values they served. There was no room for abuse of power, no room for betrayal. He thought about the steps he could take, about how he might work with his team to address the culture within the department. It wasn't just about accountability for those two officers, it was about creating an environment where integrity was non-negotiable, where respect for each other and for the community was foundational. With a renewed sense of purpose, Carter reached for a notepad on his desk and began to write, the pen moving swiftly across the page as he outlined ideas for new training programs, for team-building initiatives that would strengthen bonds and build trust. He made notes on policies that could be improved, on protocols that could be updated to prevent abuse of authority. Every note was a commitment, a promise to himself and to his team. His mind wandered to the larger picture, to the impact he wanted to leave behind. This was more than just a role to him, it was a mission. He had chosen this path not for recognition or authority, but to serve, to protect, and to build a force that could be trusted. He wanted every officer to feel that same sense of duty, that same commitment to the badge. He sat back, reviewing his notes, feeling a sense of clarity settle over him. He would hold a meeting with his team, a frank discussion about the events of the past day. He wanted each of them to share their thoughts, to express their concerns, and to feel part of the solution. They had all witnessed what had happened, and he wanted them to understand the importance of accountability. As he planned the meeting, he imagined the conversations that would take place. He knew there would be questions, concerns, even frustrations. But he was prepared to face them, to listen and to lead with empathy. It was time to rebuild trust, not just within the community but within the department itself. With a deep breath, he rose from his chair, feeling the stiffness in his muscles but ignoring it. Walking to the window, he looked out at the town below, a place he had sworn to protect and serve. He thought about the people who depended on him and his team to keep them safe, about the faith they placed in the badge. It was a heavy responsibility, but one he accepted with gratitude and humility. A small smile crossed his face as he imagined the future, a future where his department could stand as an example, a beacon of justice and integrity. This experience had been a harsh lesson, but he intended to use it as fuel, a driving force behind his mission to bring lasting change. As he stood there, a sense of peace washed over him, blending with the determination in his heart. The journey ahead would not be easy, but he was ready, more than ever, to lead with strength and compassion. His resolve was clear: he would continue his work, not just as Chief Michael Carter, but as a man committed to building a better system, a system that honored the values of justice, integrity, and respect. And no matter how difficult the path, he would face it head-on, with his team beside him, united in purpose. With one last look at the view outside his window, Carter turned back to his desk, ready to take on the challenges ahead. His scars, both physical and emotional, would serve as a reminder of his purpose. And as he prepared to call his team together, he knew that together, they could, and would, make a difference.